My name is Dr. Nish Sonwalkar, and I came to this country as a graduate student and joined MIT for the PhD program. After finishing, I joined their faculty in mechanical engineering, but my love for online education got me in trouble because I was given a grant to start a hypermedia teaching facility, which later on became Hypermedia Lab. And I ended up doing almost 20 to 30 pedagogical experiments that led to some of the developments at MIT, the Stellar, the Sakai, which came out of that, as well as some of the experiments that we did with Singapore MIT program, which remains to be a very successful program, where I had to work with 30 faculty at MIT to develop 5 master's program delivered in 3 universities in Singapore. And that was quite a challenge. It was done on time with $110 million funding from Singapore. So I think with that, when we collected all the data and created the online system, I did end up with the innovation, what we now call, and it's now become popular, called adaptive learning system. And we have added some of the nuances of brain-based adaptive learning system. And that requires a lot of personalization as well as data analytics in real time, so that you can do Markovian statistical analysis when students go through different learning strategies, and providing them real-time feedback so that they can reach their learning goals. So I'll be focusing my vantage point in terms of data analytics that leads to the learning goals in shortest amount of time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matthew Harris. I'm the co-founder of a company called College Miner. And College Miner actually started as a data mining project at Boston University. I was a graduate student, and I found out that we had to give an hour-long presentation in the class. So I wanted to come up with something kind of beneficial to the students. So I started studying student outcomes. Why are people going back to grad school? Do they get jobs related to their major? Is kind of the basis behind it. And after we kind of created a tool where students can analyze certain programs of what people were doing after they graduated, I had BU approach me, director level type guys, into developing an internal tool for them to analyze more of their programs, kind of analyze the quality of certain programs, certain majors, departments. And so what we do now is we aggregate all their evaluation data, survey data, into this tool so that they can analyze it. And one example that we do is with professors. You get all these professor evaluations. Maybe a particular professor may teach 3 or 4 courses each semester, and he may be a really good professor, but one course he doesn't teach as well. So we kind of analyze that and showing that maybe that great professor could be utilizing his resources elsewhere. And so we kind of work with tools now, with different schools now, collaborating, kind of improving our product.
Hi, I am Betsy Bateman. I am the new program director in the Instructional Design Program here at UMass Boston. Literally new, I started on Monday. And I'm also new to learning analytics, but one of the things that I used to teach online at Kent State University and Cleveland State University, where I was also an instructional designer. I also worked at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. But when it comes to learning analytics, one of the things that I find exciting is that instructional designers have been focusing on analyzing learners and contexts and trying to apply that data in educational situations for a while, and then also on the other end evaluating instructional products and techniques for their effectiveness. And in practice, I mean, it's always there in theory. Students learn the whole process, the ADDIE model, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And then if you get a job in higher ed and you start working with a professor, as a new instructional designer, and you think, oh, great, okay, well, how are we going to survey your students? And then the professor looks at you and says, this is what I'm teaching, and this is how I'm going to teach it. How do I get it online? So it's sort of, analysis has kind of taken a step back in higher ed, and something like learning analytics, which is a buzzword, can open this dialogue for us to see that we need to use this data to affect what we actually do in the classroom. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm excited and interested in what this means for the training of new instructional designers. What new research techniques do they need to learn? How does this affect the process? How I kind of see it is that instructional design tends to be, it's heavy on the front end, there's a lot of planning, use of templates, it can take months to design a class, and then you have a product and it's done. And yes, you evaluate it and have some quality improvement built into the system with evaluating it, but you're really evaluating a final product. So it's sort of like going like, here's instructional design. And what learning analytics might do is make it more rapid. So instead of working with professor in the front, you have a final product, you're working with them throughout the course in ways like this, mini instructional design processes. So I got this data from the students, and some of them didn't get it, and some of them did, and some of them sort of did. So what interventions can I do? So it's more just in time and rapid development. So these are things that will need to be taught to our new instructional design students, and I'm excited on coming here and helping to implement these new courses. Thanks.
Well, hi, good morning. My name's Roger Blake. I'm in the College of Management, and I think this has been great so far. I've learned a lot and appreciate being here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we're using analytics in the College of Management and talk about a program that's really the core of analytics for us. But that program didn't begin with any vision of analytics or any intention to use analytics or really knowledge about it, I don't think. It started with a problem that we had, that we noticed, which 5 or 6 years ago, we established learning objectives, probably like every university has and every college has. And some of those objectives were relatively easy to put into the curriculum and relatively easy to assess. Quantitative skills, for example, very easy to have a test or some kind of standardized, although maybe not with all the variability, but but relatively easy. But some of our learning objectives were things that were soft skills, which are very important for us. Soft skills such as professionalism, an ethical sense, the ability to recognize global issues and contribute something back to the community. We hadn't really built them into the curriculum, let alone try to assess those. So 5 or 6 years ago, we decided to embark on a program to bring in extracurricular activities or co-curricular activities where we would have students attend events, attend seminars, do community work, have internships, all kinds, a real spectrum of events to bring that into the curriculum. And we did that, and I have to say, it started in the fall of 2006. And personally, I was trepidatious about how students would accept this. Certainly here, we have students that commute. They have family obligations, work obligations. And here we were about to put on something else that they would have to do. One of the things that we did was we built it into our curriculum as a requirement. And the way we did that was to offer a certain number of miles or points, if you will, for certain activities, certain events. And also to establish a threshold that students had to reach in order to take the capstone course, which means in order to graduate. And well, I have to say, I expected an awful lot of resistance, grumbling, unhappy people. I was very surprised. In fact, I recognize at least one student here who could tell me if that was the case or not, but wouldn't want to put anybody on the spot. But what happened was that students, while sure, they're pressed for time, they recognize the value of this program to build professionalism and really have participated well. Since fall of 2006, when we started it, we've run about 1,400 events, so there's about 100 a semester. We made sure that there were enough events of all kinds that students could choose from some. And I believe last semester, I think there was about one event every night of the week, Monday through Thursday, pretty close to it. And we've had about 4,063 students participating in the program during that time. And they've attended, I think it was 29,700, I checked this morning, sort of attendees, if you will, or people who have attended one of these events. So it's been successful, I have to say. And again, as I said, we had no idea that analytics was going to be used for this. We were simply trying to put this into our curriculum, but that idea was certainly something that occurred to us. I have a background, before I came to academia, I was in industry for 20 years and doing this kind of work, except for we didn't call it analytics and we didn't call it business intelligence. We said decision support systems, but same concepts. And the first thing we did was ask ourselves how we could assess some of these soft skills. Great, it's in the curriculum. But how do we actually assess this and report it to our accreditation agency? Very critical. So we came up with a method of looking at not just the quantitative data that was from attendance or how fast students completed their requirements for these co-curricular activities, but also to look at the text that students wrote, because certain events require a written response. Essentially, what did I learn from this event? So we started evaluating that with text analysis, establishing what are criteria for professionalism, what would represent good professionalism, and evaluating those events on a scale. I think one of the nice parts about that to address variability is that using text analysis, there's not a mode or a model that all the responses have to meet. The text analysis can look at many dimensions to assess this professionalism and know how well students are doing with regard to that goal. The second use of that program that we're embarking on now is to evaluate the program itself. How are students doing with certain kind of events? Should we be doing more internships? Should we be doing more seminars or outside experiences at companies or whatever kind of events we should adapt our program for? And then recently we've started to look at the program through the eyes of maybe more traditional data mining analytics, which is to start to look at whether or not we can predict retention. And that's some of the research I'm doing now, and I think it's quite exciting research because I'm finding that through this program we can predict retention not just a couple of semesters into a student's career. In fact, not just at the end of the first semester, which is what is normally done, by researchers looking at GPA or performance or some other measure, but we can actually predict retention during a student's first semester by participation in the program. So early on, we're able to take a look at, here are some students who have a higher likelihood of attrition and address that issue, which is where we're at pretty much at the moment. So that's really how we're using analytics in the College of Management right now, which is largely through this program. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Neil Heffernan, and because I'm a professor and I can take too long, I'm timing myself. I'm actually very excited for you here at UMass Boston and the endeavor you're actually working on. But maybe that will make more sense if I give a little bit of background. So I'm a professor at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and I run the co-direct actually the Learning Sciences and Technologies program at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And I guess actually I'm best known, and probably why I'm on this panel, is because I helped create the Educational Data Mining Conference and Journal. And so educational data mining and / learner analytics, they kind of actually are the same thing, but using big sources of data. So the big sources of data that actually we use in my work actually is stuff that we actually create ourselves, and it's called the assessment system. It's used This is a project I've been doing for a decade and used by actually 17,000 children this year in middle school, high school, elementary school, and probably about 80 districts here in Massachusetts and about 150 across the United States. And so but let me back up a second. So I was a teacher in the Teach for America program in Baltimore City. And when the provost began and the dean began, and we're talking about access. Access is it, right? And we were talking about access as if actually like, oh, putting it online actually is going to actually help. Well, there's one of the problems we actually see is actually this technology that we've built that's now actually catching fire and is being used across our suburban districts has a much harder time catching fire in the cities. So when we have so many of our schools that actually have kind of poor states of their technology and they don't actually have the ability to, say, send homework home, where our suburban districts are just doing this now. Every time I speak, I try to remind us and our policy leaders about the importance of closing the digital divide. We just got a $3.5 million grant to actually do a huge study in the state of Maine with 54 schools. And we did it in the state of Maine because the governor bought laptops for every 7th and 8th grader in the state and has been doing so for a decade. Math scores haven't really changed much there, but it's really important to actually give them the sorts of technologies that might actually cause that to happen. And so anyways, you guys are in the city, you actually totally understand some of the access issues. But anyways, there's, I actually get sad at night when I think about the thing that my wife and I have created, in that actually it's making our digital divide worse, because we're helping these suburban districts get the types of feedback that actually millions of kids are actually getting denied right now, which is immediate feedback as they go on their nightly homework. We're going to have 10 million kids tonight that will get no feedback on their homework until tomorrow. We know as a cognitive scientist, and you can read some of our papers that have proved it, but that's not a good thing. So anyways, access I think is really important. I guess actually to give a little context of how I got into this. So after teaching in Teach for America, I was diagnosed with a cancerous brain tumor, and I was told I had 2 to 3 years to live. And my wife and I decided we got to do something important. And since I thought I couldn't cure cancer, we decided, all right, why don't we actually make sure we do something big? And so, which is why we give away this thing, the assessment system, to actually these schools. So I guess I want to make a point, because actually the dean was talking about actually applied research and the integration between research and application. You can't do learner analytics unless you got some data, okay? And you can't do research unless you actually have a platform by which you can that you can control it and do stuff. Google actually experimented. They ran 12,000 experiments in 2009, according to the Dave Brooks article that actually was just published in the New York Times like last week. It's really important to be actually applying randomized controlled trials to actually find out what works. While I love learner analytics and data mining, nothing tells you, that gives you some ideas. It doesn't actually tell you about causality. And it's really important to be able to actually run randomized controlled trials. So I think you should think of actually the e-learning thing that you want to actually do is actually having a useful platform that you guys own, and that you own the data and you own the control over it. If you don't do that, you're at the whims of the Blackboards of the world that actually are going to actually not allow you to do some of the types of research that you might actually otherwise want to. Maybe enough about me, and actually I'm excited to actually see you guys taking these big steps. I'll be competing with you because we're probably going to hire 2 or 3 faculty actually this year in learning sciences and technologies, but it's clearly actually a big, huge growth area, and I applaud the university from really stepping up into this. Thanks.